Hi, it's Jen with Astrology. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are starting our series on a true crime, the charts of famous serial killers. So the first one we're going to start with today is the chart of Jeffrey Dahmer. I think probably many of you have heard about him. He's pretty famous, unfortunately, not for good things. Picky. And so Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960, and he died, and that was at 4:34 p.m. and he died on November 28th, 1994 at 34 years of age. So in interpreting this chart, you're going to see how I go about interpreting a chart, starting to kind of get the feel of it and seeing if anything kind of sticks out that there might have been some issues here. So when you start interpreting a chart, you always want to start with the big three. And I know this is a little bit upside down, but I wanted to start, have it started right on his ascendant, which is in Libra. So you always want to look at the ascendant, the sun, and the moon. So the ascendant is in Libra at 19 degrees in the Uranus decan of Libra, and then he's got the sun at 0 Gemini up here, so it's at 0 degrees Gemini, so just getting into that 9th house, and then he's got the moon at 19 degrees of Aries, which I don't have the moon up here, but there we go. I don't know if it's going to stay, so it might fall off, and that is in the 7th house. So knowing what happened in hindsight, we can see that he wanted partnership. How do we know that? Because the moon is in the 7th house. What is his desires? What are his deepest wants, his needs? And it is the moon being in, and it's in the 7th house. So the 7th house is about partnerships. Now, the moon is in Aries, so he's going to go after what he wants. He wants that partnership. He also has Mars in Aries. So Mars is in its dignity in Aries, so that even more compels him to really have that drive to go after what he wants. So again, Mars is in its dignity. If you're not sure what the dignities, debilities are, definitely check back on the video I put out on that. And I'll put a link in the description, but ultimately the dignity is that Mars is in its rulership, or it rules Aries. So it's at home in Aries, it feels comfortable there, that's where Mars pretty much does the best. But this is, it's an active, aggressive with the moon, so that rashness, can work in negative ways, unfortunately. So he also has Saturn right here in Capricorn. He's got Mars, he's got Mercury that's up here in Gemini, and Venus, which is right here in Taurus, and they're all in their dignity. So you would think, wow, this guy, he's got it pretty lucky, but again, it's all in how you use it. But this is likely how he was able to get away with things for so long. Over and over, he had some close calls. If you have watched the Netflix series or anything else on Jeffrey Dahmer, you know that there were some close calls there where he could have gotten caught. Well, he's got Mercury in Gemini. So Mercury is in its dignity in Gemini. So it's a ruler of Gemini. So he could really easily, using his words, using the way he communicated, he could convince people that, what he was doing was okay. He convinced the police at one time that the child that he did have captive that tried to get away, that he was of age and just his drunk boyfriend, and the cops were like, okay, yeah, take him back. So he had that way of, just explaining things and maybe coming across and communicating to people in that believable way. Also, he has not only his ascendant is Venus, so the ascendant ruler is Venus, but the ascendant ruler is in Taurus. So Venus rules both Taurus and Libra. And I said right? His ascendant was in Libra, not in Venus, but anyway. So that's the face he puts forward. And uh, so Venus is good looking, it's likable, and then we have Mars here. That's the sexuality, that's that drive. Unfortunately, it was driving him towards the wrong things. He also has, you know, Jupiter down here is in its fall. So he's got Jupiter, and Uranus is in its fall too. So it's opposite of its exaltation. So its exaltation is in Cancer, so it doesn't really have that compassion that, you know, might not has been as caring when he was going after what he wants. Obviously not. He was more caring about what he wanted, his drive. And he was someone who, you know, again, went after what he wanted because he was almost pushing compassion to the side in order to fulfill his own needs, which were, you know, Capricorn. Capricorn is what you're driving towards. What, you know, that is in its dignity. Saturn is in its dignity in Capricorn. So, you know, that's kind of like putting up almost its dignity. So it's putting up barriers. So his home was kind of that barrier that he put up to get the things he wanted, which was that companionship. So the home is the fourth house. It's got Capricorn in there. That's where he did, you know, wherever his home was at the time was when he did these murders, is when he kidnapped these people and kept them out of their control. So, you know, he got them drunk. I know he had done some really crazy things to them to keep them almost under his control. So he wanted to control them, put boundaries on them, keep them contained, Saturn, in his home. So that's kind of where the fourth house, Jupiter, you know, this was big. This was, you know, what consumed him. This was, you know, Jupiter expands. So it's expand that consumption or that obsession with what he wanted. And, you know, in the home and in opposition of Cancer, just showed no care except for his own needs. So he wanted to create this partner, Mars and Moon in the second. He did this by killing them and keeping them. What we've read about him, or what we've heard about him, is that he kept parts of them and did things with parts of them to really kind of keep them almost, you know, as a part of him, to almost make them a part of him, to keep them with him, because he didn't want them to be separated from him. One of his biggest fears, is what he talked about, was that he would be alone, that he didn't want to be alone, and he wanted this ultimate companionship and this love. So we have then Venus up here in the 8th house. So Venus is about love. The 8th house can be about death. It can be about taboos, like taboo sexuality. So definitely there were some taboos in the things that he did. Also, it's the house of seeing enemies. So he was, you know, the enemy of these lovers of his, obviously, because he killed them. So, and then with Taurus, with the food and drink, food, okay, the things he did with the people that he killed, but then the drinking, that was a huge thing too. He was very much of a big drinker. He had been drinking most of his adult, even teenage life. I think that is even what got him kicked out of the military. So drinking was definitely a problem there. You know, we know that kind of that Taurus-y, you know, eating, drinking, kind of, and in the taboo house of death, you know, kind of figures in a little bit there. So he is a cardinal, you know, with cardinal Earth being the majority of his, where the majority of his planets lie. So Saturn is really prominent in his chart. So Capricorn, it figures largely. Capricorn is, again, the goals. Sometimes stop at nothing to get their goals. You know, you think of Capricorn can sometimes be a little obsessed with being, you know, the top of the corporate ladder. Maybe they're workaholics. You know, so sometimes they take these, what their goal is in life, and it becomes almost an obsession, and it becomes, you know, it can kind of be the root of all evil. So with him, it obviously was evil. So back to his ascendant in Libra. We're going to go back here. So that's the face he put forward. He was good looking, able to convince and lure these victims by going to bars, and they would be attracted to him. Libra rising can be very charming. They appear to be all around good and able to see the good and bad in everyone. So, you know, people kind of took an interest in him. So probably why he seemed very trustworthy. His sun in Mercury up here is, or his sun in Gemini is also conjunct his Mercury. So also very strong communication, strong, you know, and again, Mercury is in its rulership in Gemini, so that's he had very compelling communication, especially using that sun, that's his drive to get what he wants. So using that, you know, his powers of, you know, persuasion, he was able to get out of getting arrested a couple times. I think he did get arrested, but then it was, you know, for a lesser charge. And then, you know, so that drive to convince people to get what you want, to learn, ninth house, how to go about, you know, getting these people to come back with him, to convince them to come back with him, and then to ultimately make them or create in them the partner that the moon that he always wanted. So it's that power of persuasion, but again, in Gemini, his sun is in Gemini. Gemini can be that two-sided, that almost two-faced, like, you know, one side is telling you one thing, and one side is saying something completely different, maybe behind your back. Well, with him, it was more the face. You know, he was telling people one thing, convincing them, I'm going to take your picture, you know, I'm a famous photographer, I can convince you to do these things. You know, this is his drive, this is his, you know, his will, this is what he wanted. And that was, you know, so, you know, what Gemini, that very negative thing about Gemini is that, you know, people say they can be two-faced, or they could be, you know, totally, you know, opposite, because it's the two talking there. So his parents, so let's get into his kind of background and family. His parents are represented, fathers in a chart are represented by the 4th house, and moms are represented by the 10th house. So the ruler of the 10th house is mom. So the 10th house is Cancer, so the ruler, what would represent his mom, would be the moon in his 7th house. And then we have his father, Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn, and that is who kind of would represent his father. Well, if you look, his father and mother are actually square to each other. So that shows that there's issues between them, there's friction, and if you know anything about his history, you know his parents were divorced. This was a big cause of what kind of, he says, maybe led him to do these bad things, because I guess when they first got divorced, they separated, his mother went away, and his father was gone, and they kind of left him alone. So, you know, he doesn't want to be alone. He's got his moon here in the 7th house. So what is he going to do? He wants companionship. So his drive is to get him a companion. So then we look, and he also has a grand trine. So a grand trine is pretty much, you know, two planets trine to each other, and then another trine to another planet, and then back. So I don't have it up here because I ran out of room, but the trine goes from the north node in the 12th house in Virgo, So that would be right here. So the north node goes this way. And that is trying to Saturn here, and then up to Venus up here. So this is all, and if you have a grand trine, it's all going to be in the same sign. So things are going to kind of come easy to him. So again, we're seeing where things came to him easily, but he obviously didn't use it in a good way. So he's got a lot of those, you know, planets in their dignity. He has this grand trine, so he could have actually done a lot with his life. But, you know, we have the North Node in the mutable sign of the earth signs in Virgo. So when something's in Virgo, that means it's mutable. That means it's getting kind of down to the details, able to be like the cleanup crew, able to go with the flow. So, you know, if you were to just suddenly murder someone, I think you would put you in a panic, but he had a way of just kind of like, you know, being able to take care of it, being able to clean up those loose ends, being able to control himself in that situation. That's that mutable energy that, you know, just kind of makes you able to just like, okay, we're just going to deal with this. It's in Virgo, so it's, you know, okay, so here's what we're going to do to deal with this. We're going to XXX, you know. And it's also in the 12th house. His North Node is also in the 12th house. So, you know, going towards, you know, keeping things hidden. So he had a lot of hidden things. The 12th house is about things that you hide away. He hid these desires away. He hid these people away. He, you know, so it was a lot about hiding things away. And it's trying to his 4th house in his home, and which is also in the trine, the grand trine with Venus that is in his 8th house of taboo things. So he's in his home doing these taboo killings, and then hiding them away. So it just kind of shows, you know, this is happening. It could be, you know, something that's great, giving him stability. This is in earth signs, but because of kind of how these line up, it's more taking on that negative. So you can see that even with 4 planets in dignity and a grand trine, it doesn't always mean that great things are going to happen. It's really how you use it. You have to use it in a positive way, and, you know, if you work with even the negatives in your chart, you can make them positives. It just takes a little bit of work. So he obviously, you know, didn't work with these things in the positive way that he could have. He worked with them in a negative way. So he has also, which I have here, the South Node over here in Pisces. So, because if you have the North Node in Virgo, the South Node is directly the polar opposite. So, that's in the 6th house. So that's the South Node represents what you fall back on, kind of your comfort zone. So this is, you know, Pisces can be about addiction. This is his weakness. This is what kind of is, you know, almost what kind of gets him caught ultimately, is because he does have this addiction to alcohol, which we see kind of up here in the 8th house with Taurus, with, you know, that drinking, that maybe overindulgence, and then we have that as a health factor in his 6th house in Pisces. So his also, which I don't have a block of it, but his Chiron, and I've talked about Chiron in the past. Chiron is an asteroid, and Chiron represents past pains and like a past hurt that you can't cure and that you can't get rid of. So Chiron is also in his 6th house. So this past pain is causing him, with him trying to drown out this pain, drowning it out with alcohol, you know, opposed to keeping things hidden. Again, you know, it's all about this alcohol and, you know, his drive for love, and then, you know, doing things in not quite the best way, and then hiding that. So his past trauma, you know, maybe with his parents, that square, that father and mother getting divorced, the square with his mother and father, father Saturn, mother it's the moon. So it's again the past trauma that transforms him into a kind of what he becomes. It's also this Chiron is in opposition. So if Chiron was there, let's pretend that's Chiron. We're just going to hide it. It's in opposition to his Pluto. It's Pluto because if it's in the sixth house, but by degree it is in opposition to his Pluto, and Pluto is about like obsession, compulsion. Obviously, he was obsessed and compelled to do these things. And in interviews that he's had, he said he just couldn't stop. So he was grateful that ultimately that he got caught, because that was the only way he would ever stop. So if you want to look at some transits that happened, maybe some solar arcs to see on those important dates, to see exactly, maybe the flags that, set him off. So on June 18th, 1978, we have Mars in transit, and it is conjunct on that day. It is exact conjunction with his Pluto in his 12th house. So that is aggression, it's compulsion, it's sudden change. So that is the day that he kidnapped his first victim and killed him. So we have kidnapping, 12th house, keeping somebody hidden away. We have total transformation. I think, if you kill someone, become that monster, you let that monster out, you're transformed into a whole different person. And, the Mars, that's that aggression, that's that fight, that's that, I'm going to get what I want without regard for what's right. And that's, pretty much the day he was transformed into this killer that he became. So a solar arc, we're going to get into that as well. So solar arcs are pretty much, you count 1 degree per day, and that's per planet. So it's 1 degree per day, and so you can move the planets ahead 1 degree for each 1 degree per year. I'm sorry, not per day. So it's 1 degree per year of his life. So if, say, he's got, he had, I think the sun was at 0 degrees Gemini. So at 30 years old, it would be at 0 degrees Cancer. So you just count 1. And so that's kind of like if you have a quick reading done with an astrologer, that's kind of a way that they get to grab you. They can count and they can see certain things happening. Oh, so what happened to you when you were 30 years old? Well, so what happened to Jeffrey Dahmer? So about the time his solar arc ascendant moved into Scorpio, so when it moved into this new sign of Scorpio, hold on a second, let me just look at my notes. Okay, so it was moved in. So Scorpio is, again, about that obsession. It's about that, desire, fulfilling that desire deep down. And then we also have, at the same time, we have his moon moving into the 8th house. Now, this is... So during this time, Pluto was actually transiting his first house. This was happening between 1971 and 1984. So we have Pluto transiting his first house, transformation of who he was. He was developing into that person he became. He started collecting roadkill and, transforming into that serial killer. And that's within that time he, was collecting roadkill. He made his first murder in 1978, and then subsequently after that. So we have then also the moon around this time moving into the 8th house. So that's, again, taboos, death. And then we have Mars, the solar arc Mars, coming into a conjunction with his natal moon. So that is, going after his needs with no regard whatsoever. So at 30 years old, his solar arc sun changed signs, and this is a significant year as well, because this is the year that most of the murders happened. So that was in when he was 30 years old. So that was around 1990. So then on July 22nd, 1991, this was the day that he was caught. So that transiting Mars, the one that, set off his Pluto, that first murder, so Mars figured obviously pretty prominently in his chart, because the transits with Mars really did things. So, that when it transited and came conjunct to his Pluto, that's when he committed his first murder. So on this day, July 22, 1991, transiting Mars was conjunct his natal Pluto. So again, authority figures. So whenever Mars hits his Pluto, something big happens. So authority figures, police, tension with authority, and that's the day he was actually captured. That was the turning point, that Pluto ending, no going back. Also on that day, Saturn, the Saturn transit was in a quincunx with Pluto. So a quincunx is, you can't see, you can't understand. And Saturn is bringing something to an end. So he didn't see this ending coming. He didn't know that they were coming. I guess this guy escaped. He was drinking, and with that quincunx, that's the police. That's the police that stopped him. They put that barrier. They put that ending, and that's the Saturn. So that's pretty much the story of Jeffrey Dahmer with his natal chart and a few little transits and solar arcs added in there. So I hope you had fun, and we're going to continue on with our true crime series with a couple serial killers coming up in this upcoming season. So be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can see the upcoming videos. So I hope you had fun. If you have any suggestions for any other serial killers or any true crime that you'd like to see the chart of, please add it in the comment section. And if you need to contact me for a reading of your own, definitely check out my updated website, astrology.net, and I hope to hear from you soon. So remember to subscribe. Have a good one. Bye-bye.